I'm Luna. He struck me hard enough to leave a bruise just below my eye. Parents saw it, looked at me for a second, then turned away. He laughed from the armchair, smugly saying, "You have such a polite little family." That night I sat, quietly, by myself, small and sore, but I lit a light source. 30 minutes later, when the door clicked open again, I wasn't the one who stayed down. Before we go further, tell me, have you ever stayed quiet just to keep things calm, only to realize you lost everything? Drop a comment below. What moment is it where you are? And would you have stood up too? When I heard the knock, my body froze, not out of fear, but out of habit. I stayed on the couch, a cold towel pressed against my left cheek, the skin tender and swollen. I hadn't cried, not even once. Crying only makes the pain echo louder. Silence, on the other hand, keeps it contained. The door opened before I could move. My parents entered, like they always did, no warning. The sound of shopping bags rustling filled the air, along with the familiar scent of the fabric softener and soap they'd used forever. I turned slightly to face them. That was enough. My mother paused, her hands trembling around the shopping bag. My father's eyes narrowed, not in shock, but in calculation, like he was measuring something. I couldn't tell if it was me or the bruise on my cheek. No one said anything. Behind me, the hum of the television program was the only sound. A sitcom rerun with fake laughter played, clashing with the heavy silence filling the room. Then, Ethan appeared in the corridor, shirtless, holding a nearly empty alcoholic beverage. He leaned against the doorframe with a smirk. Well, look who's back. The polite little family. He didn't even try to hide it, the arrogance in his voice, the control. My father gave a stiff nod. My mother looked away. They both walked into the cooking area, placing the bags on the counter with the care of setting up a photo shoot. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. They left without saying a word, the door clicking softly behind them, more like a sigh than a goodbye. The clock ticked loudly after that. Or maybe it just felt that way. Ethan burped behind me and settled into the recliner, acting like nothing had happened. The chair creaked under him as he relaxed. I didn't look at him. I already knew what I'd see. His heavy breaths, the smug smile still tugging at his lips. My fingers touched the bruise again, not to comfort myself, but to remind me. The truth is, it didn't start today. It never does. A couple of hours ago, I had finally said it out loud. "Stop treating me like I'm some bargain you found on sale," I snapped. Ethan was standing in the cooking area halfway through his alcoholic beverage. He didn't even flinch. He just stared at me, like I was interrupting his show. "You done?" he asked, his voice flat. "I'm serious." That was all it took. The slap came so quickly, I didn't even have time to react. My ear rang and I stumbled, crashing against the edge of the counter. The air was knocked out of me with one sharp gasp. I blinked up at him, and he apologized, just like that. "Come on, babe. You always push me. You always make it a big deal." Don't remember nodding, but I know I didn't argue. Back in the lounge, he relaxed in the recliner, drifting into a nap like nothing had happened. The alcoholic beverage bottle balanced on his chest. A habit. The room smelled of cheap hops and whatever cologne he thought still worked. I stood, walked slowly to the restroom, and wiped the blood from my lip with toilet paper. I didn't flinch. When the paper came back red, stared at the woman in the mirror for a long time. She looked tired, but she wasn't broken. "I don't matter to them," I said aloud. "I don't matter to him. I exist." My voice didn't shake. I picked up my phone, opened a message thread with just an initial typed, "I'm ready," then deleted it. I typed it again and sent it. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. Back in the lounge, the sky had darkened. A cold breeze slipped under the window, making the curtains flutter. It was like something was breathing just outside. 30 minutes passed, the kind of 30 minutes where the air thickens and your mind sharpens. Then clicked the front door. Ethan stirred, grunted, but didn't get up. I rose quietly, walked to the door, and opened it. Rachel stood there. No coat, just a thick sweater and jeans. She held a plain black duffel bag in one hand, a brown folder tucked under her arm. Her hair was pulled back, face clean and calm, but her eyes were locked on mine, like we'd been waiting for this moment our whole lives. She didn't say hello, didn't smile. She just stepped inside and looked, first at me, then at the Bruise, then at Ethan. I gave the smallest nod. She set the duffel on the floor gently, the folder beside it. No words. I walked to the cooking area. The floor creaked beneath my bare feet. I picked up a small black envelope from the drawer, the kind you save for letters that don't need stamps. Ethan stirred again, muttered something, cracked one eye. Open. I placed the envelope beside his alcoholic beverage. He squinted. "What the hell is that?" he mumbled. I looked at him, really looked. For the first time that entire day, I didn't lower my eyes. I didn't back down. "Don't worry," I said softly. "It's not poison." I paused. "It might kill something else." He blinked, confused, reached lazily for the envelope, but missed. I turned and walked down the corridor. The carpet muted my steps. Rachel followed silently, the duffel now slung over her shoulder. The door to the bedroom clicked shut behind me, and I let the silence say the rest. I didn't slam the bedroom door. I didn't even let it click shut. I eased it closed behind me, like I was putting a baby down for sleep. Rachel was already unzipping the duffel before I turned around. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and faint fear. Not mine, his. It was still clinging to the walls, even though he hadn't stepped foot in here in weeks. Rachel placed the folder on the bed, right beside a tightly rolled change of clothes, a new toothbrush still in its wrapper, and a black leather-bound notebook with tabs peeking out. I glanced at myself in the mirror above the dresser. The swelling had crept down from my eye, pooling into a dull bruise on my cheekbone. I pressed 2 fingers to it, not to soothe it, but to remind myself it was real. He'd done that, and my parents had seen it, seen me, and walked out. Rachel pulled out a recorder the size of a lipstick. "Battery's fresh," she said quietly. Then she handed me the folder. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. Every page was familiar. Every line was something I'd lived with in silence. A notarized power of attorney granting me sole control over shared accounts. Screenshots of Ethan's online transfers. My money pulled without consent, funneled into some poker app with cartoon dice. Incident reports I'd written but never dared submit. One from January, another from June, a third from just last week. Each marked with the same red pen Rachel kept in her purse and then tucked at the Bacalise. A tiny apartment 12 miles south, under her name, but signed by me. "I paid the first 2 months. You don't owe me," Rachel said. I didn't. Answer: I didn't cry. I just flipped to the last page, then closed the folder and laid it flat on the bed. 2 weeks ago, it sat at the public library pretending to browse cookbooks while she whispered, "You don't need this stuff too. Believe yourself, but the court does. Its lawyer will." I'd asked her then why she was doing all this, why she was risking anything. And she looked at me like I was slow. "Because no one else is. Because I believe you. And because I'm not leaving you here to rot while they call it a marriage." That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and finally believed something I hadn't allowed myself to in years. I mattered to someone. Rachel tapped her phone. "We've got one window. After that, he'll be watching every door, every message, every noise." I nodded. "He's already lost control. He just doesn't know it yet." Her hand disappeared into the side pocket of the duffel and came out holding a flip phone. No apps, no tracking, just numbers and calls. She handed it to me. "If he finds out, she whispered, "he'll flip this house upside down." Fingers curled around the phone. "Then we better move before the recliner stops creaking." I meant it half as a joke, But as if on cue, I heard the creak of wood just outside the door, the faint shuffle of feet, and the clink of glass on glass. The recliner had given him up. Then silence, then footsteps. Ethan was moving again. I cracked. The door opened just enough to hear. The front room was quiet, but I could feel the stillness before something broke. The envelope I'd left next to his alcoholic beverage was probably open by now. I could picture his face as he saw the statement, the red circles Rachel had drawn. The numbers that didn't lie, the withdrawals, the dates, the little yellow sticky note I'd placed at the bottom. You'll want a lawyer, not a buyer. Rachel nodded toward the corridor. Time. Before she could say more, we heard heavy steps storming toward the bedroom. But I didn't wait. I opened the door myself and stepped into the hall just as he raised his fist to knock. He froze mid-motion, caught off guard. His eyes were wide, pupils sharp, his lips parted like he was about to bark something, but nothing came. I held up. My phone. That envelope, that's the beginning, not the end. He blinked, confused, then angry. His hand reached out and grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to try and control me. It wasn't fear I saw in him this time. It was panic smeared with guilt. Before I could speak again, Rachel stepped out behind me, her own phone already recording. Let go of her, she said flatly. She's already live. Ethan released my wrist like it burned him. He stumbled back a step, eyes darting between us, searching for some footing that no longer existed. I took one step forward, shoulders square, face calm, smile. Ethan, I said evenly, you're finally on camera. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink, and that silence was louder than the slap. His face twitched when I said it. Not a blink, not a word, just a flicker. Like a wire in his brain short-circuited for a split-second dot. Then came the sound. Not a fist this time, but something louder, desperate, scrambling. You set me up. He barked it like a man trying to swat at smoke, realizing too late that the fire was already under his feet. You dragged your friend into our marriage. His chest rose and fell too fast. His voice cracked, part rage, part disbelief. You're trying to ruin me. I didn't move, didn't flinch. I just watched. Rachel held her phone still angled slightly to the side, her other hand curled around the strap of her duffel. She didn't speak either. No comfort, no warning, just presence. Ethan circled like a caged dog. This is entrapment. You know that, right? You can't just set someone up and record them like this. His voice had that high, brittle edge, now the kind that came when he felt cornered, but thought he could still bluff his way out. He jabbed, a finger toward the cooking area. You brought a witness into our home to bait me. I finally spoke quiet and level. I didn't bring a witness. I brought protection. His jaw twitched again. I swear to God, Luna, I'll call the cops myself. I'll tell them you've lost it, that you're violent, unstable. You broke into my email. You've been spying on me. I tilted my head. Good, he blinked. What? I walked to the coffeetable.com and unhurried and picked up the manila envelope I'd placed earlier. I handed it to him like a waitress with a bill. I already called them. You'll want to be ready when they knock. That's what they're walking into. He pulled the flap open and froze. Inside was a stapled packet, dates, medical notes, photographs. A printed copy of the restraining order request Rachel was filing with me at dawn. At the top, emergency petition, domestic safety concern. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was weight. The weight of truth hitting a man used to throwing punches and walking away without consequence. He scanned the page. One hand dropped to his side, the other tightened on the paper. For once, he was speechless. I took a slow step back, not out of fear, just to give the scene room to breathe. And in that breath, my mind drifted back. 2 months ago, I'd started writing down everything. Not because I planned, this I hadn't. I was just tired of doubting my own memory. There was the morning I woke up with a bruise behind my ear and no recollection of how it got there. So I snapped a photo and uploaded it to a private folder I'd created under a fake cloud name Rivertown Books, just in case. Then there was the night I locked myself in the restroom, shaking, while Ethan banged on the door. I scribbled down what he'd said, every word. I sent it to Rachel without even knowing why. She answered 2 hours later. "Keep documenting. I believe you." Those 4 words were heavier than any slap he'd ever dealt. Later, I got a nurse friend to notarize the ER visit where I said I'd slipped in the garage. She didn't ask questions, just hugged me a little longer than usual. And then there were the recordings, quiet ones. Like the voicemail he left last week when he'd been drinking. "No one believes you anyway, Luna. I'm the one with a job. I'm the one who takes care of things. You're just here. You're nothing." That voice, flat and cruel, was now my safety net. Back in the lounge, Ethan tried again. "You know what people are going to think? You're the one obsessed. You're the unstable one. I'll tell everyone you were tracking me. You're paranoid." I didn't answer with words. I opened the recorder app on my phone, turned up the volume, and pressed play. His voice filled the air like smoke seeping under a door. "You're so stupid it hurts. You think you matter, but you're property. You're nothing but a burden I'm stuck with." Rachel didn't blink, just stared at him, expression unreadable. He flinched, his face drained of color. He looked smaller, weaker, like a kid caught stealing, but still thinking he could blame someone else. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge and the tail end of his own voice echoing from the speaker. Then came the faint flicker of red and blue light through the blinds. Ethan spun toward the window. You actually called them?" "I didn't look. I didn't need to." I walked to the front door slowly. My hand found the doorknob. I paused, breathed in. Then I said almost kindly, "Let's see if you still smirk in a mugshot." The knock wasn't loud, but Ethan's voice behind it broke like glass panicked, rising with that shrill edge I'd heard too many times before. "She's setting me up. Don't believe a word. She's got her friend hiding in the kitchen with a camera." By the time the 2 officers stepped into view, their flashlights flicking across the hallway, Ethan had already backed toward the staircase, hands lifted high. In a gesture of innocence so rehearsed I could almost see the cards behind his eyes. "She ambushed me," he said quickly. "She's unstable. She's been acting strange for weeks, trying to ruin my life." I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped aside and gestured toward the kitchen table where I'd neatly arranged the folders stabbed. Dated, signed, the USB Rachel handed over landed in the officer's palm with a soft click. "You'll want to start with the timeline." One of the officers, a younger man with a high and tight haircut and a sharp jaw, flipped open the top file. The other, a woman maybe in her 50s, glanced at Rachel, then at me. "You did all this yourself?" she asked, almost like it surprised her. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The younger one gave a low whistle as he scrolled through images on the USB. These ... these are time-stamped. Yes, and notarized." My voice stayed level. Ethan, still half-shadowed, by the stairs, laughed. Was brittle, hollow. "Wow, this is insane. She's staging an entire production." The officer ignored him and kept scrolling. They asked him to sit down. When he didn't, the younger one quietly unclipped his radio and muttered a code I didn't catch, but it made Ethan's shoulders drop. Slowly he sat. By the time the sun crept over the tree line behind our house, we were in 2 separate cruisers headed for the precinct. I rode with the older officer, her nameplate reading Brenly. The leather of the back seat cold through my jeans. At the station, Rachel and I were separated. She shot me a quiet look before they led her down another hallway. I was ushered into a pale green interview room with no windows, just a table, 2 chairs, and a camera humming quietly in the corner. Officer Brenly returned alone and shut the door gently behind her. "You know," she said, pulling out a notepad, It's rare to see someone come in this prepared. I didn't smile. I didn't prepare to fight. I prepared to be believed. She nodded slowly, eyes studying mine like she was deciding what kind of woman I was. We went through the files. She asked questions. I answered them without tears. I'd already cried in every room of that house. I didn't have any left for. The station, across the hallway, I could hear Ethan's voice loud, aggressive, familiar. When Officer Brunley excused herself, a man in a gray suit entered the room opposite mine. Ethan's attorney. He'd arrived too quickly, which meant he'd been on standby. Probably sent by Ethan's father, a retired judge in Forsyth County. The shift in energy was immediate. When Brunley came back, her demeanor had cooled. The questions got sharper. Less about what happened, more about why I'd kept it to myself for so long. She tapped the affidavit. You didn't go to the police until today. Why now? I didn't wait, I said quietly, reaching into the folder for one last document. I documented and I warned someone months ago. I slid the affidavit across the table. It was signed by my therapist, dated 6 months ago. In it, she noted the risk of escalation, specifically naming Ethan. The last paragraph read, Client shows reasonable fear for her safety in the marital home. Should incidents escalate, she is encouraged to take legal protection measures immediately. Brunley. Read it twice. Still, she asked the question I'd feared the most. You sure you're not just trying to get ahead in a divorce? Property split? Custody? Leverage? For a second, my hands did tremble, but I folded them tight in my lap. I knew what I looked like: calm, dry, spine too straight, not broken enough to seem real. I answered plainly. If I'd waited for things to get worse, someone would have blamed me for not coming sooner. If I come now, they say I'm calculating. So I prepared because I knew no one would hand me the benefit of the doubt. She didn't respond, just scribbled something down. My mind drifted, just for a moment, to a night 3 months ago in my therapist's office. The room was lit, soft and warm, while the world outside felt colder than bone. I'd asked her almost. Whispered, if I leave and no one helps, and he kills me anyway, will they say I was crazy for staying? She'd put her pen down, looked at me, then said, don't leave, in a way they can forget. That night, I started planning not to punish Ethan, but to make sure I lived. Back in the room, Officer Brunley rose and said she'd be back in a few. I waited, counting the slow tick of the wall clock. When she returned, she exhaled first an audible sigh. Like she didn't want to say what came next. We're holding him for 24 hours, she said. After that, it gets more complicated. I nodded. She handed me a clipboard with my restraining order documents I signed without hesitation. No ceremony, no relief, just steps, one after another. Outside, the sky had turned a washed-out gray blue. The morning chill bit at my skin, but I didn't shiver. Rachel met me at the bottom of the station's steps. Her eyes searched mine. Did they listen? I nodded, then turned toward the lot where my car was parked. That, I whispered to myself, as I slid into the driver's seat, was the easy part. Scary. Because the hard part was telling my mother what happened and hearing her say nothing. The silence in the car ride back to the rental was thicker than anything the police station had. Offered not heavy like fear, just waited. Like the air around us was tired too. Rachel parked along the curb outside the modest unit I'd rented on short notice. It's the kind of place you don't plan to stay in long. It's thin walls, beige, everything. It's a kind of kitchen that made you reach for takeout menus without even opening the fridge. I turned the key. The door clicked. And that sound, so small, was the first real breath I'd taken all day. We stepped inside. Rachel helped me carry the last of the bags in. Neither of us said much. She'd stayed beside me since dawn through the report. The processing, the emotionless bureaucracy of it all. Now here we were, 2 women in a room full of someone else's furniture. She unfolded the spare blanket on the worn-out couch. You want me to stay? She asked. I shook my head. I need to do this one thing alone. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe she knew this part wasn't about safety or comfort, but something else. Something I had to face with my own voice after. She left. I stood in the middle of that apartment, unsure of what to do with my hands. They felt like they were still holding something. Maybe fear, maybe memory. I sat down at the little kitchen table, the kind with plastic veneer peeling at the edges. I reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over her name. Mom, it was always. Just saved as that. Not mother, not Janie, not home, just Mom. I tapped it. It rang, and my heart didn't race the way it used to when I was in trouble as a kid. It didn't pound like when Ethan used to yell, just ached. A deep, hollow kind of yearning that had lived in me for decades. She picked up Luna. Her voice was careful. Not worried, not warm, just level. I just wanted you to know, I said. It's been arrested. Pause. For what? I swallowed. For what he's done to me. She didn't say anything. I kept going. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear myself say it out loud to someone who knew me before I ever knew fear. The bruises, the hospital visits, the money he took, the screaming. I thought maybe you saw something. I thought maybe you'd come back. Another long pause. Marriage isn't perfect, Luna, but airing your laundry like this, we raised you stronger than that. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. That was it. That was her answer. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even feel this sting in my chest until several seconds later, because that was the moment I realized I'd been carrying the wrong hope. I set the phone down, didn't hang up, just let it sit there on the table, her voice still humming, in the background, then fading, then gone. I opened my journal, the one Rachel gave me months ago, back when she started noticing the quiet in my eyes. I wrote slowly. Today I buried the last illusion. I don't need her to understand. I just need to stop needing her. I closed the journal, crossed the room, the envelope peeked out from my purse. The one I'd carried into the precinct, full of records, photos, statements. It's the one I never thought I'd use. I pulled out a clean folder from the drawer and slid the envelope inside. Then I labeled it in black marker. Closure. The sun had dipped. By now, shadows crept long across the carpet, the kind of light that makes everything look quieter than it feels. I made tea something warm to hold, not to drink. I sat back on the couch, letting the steam rise and curl into the air. My body still remembered where every bruise had been, but I didn't flinch anymore. That's when the knock came. Not harsh, just 2 sharp taps. I stood, opened the door. Rachel, her face was pale, eyes wide. Not from fear, but disbelief. You need to see this. She brushed past me and grabbed the remote from the coffee table, flipping on the tiny mounted TV above the counter. A local news broadcast. There he was in a button-down shirt. Not even wrinkled. Like nothing had happened. His lawyer stood off to the side, nodding along as he spoke. I never wanted to hurt anyone, Ethan said into the microphone. My wife, she's struggling emotionally. It's been a hard time. I just want her to get the help she needs. Help. Rachel looked at me. I didn't blink. I just watched. He smiled for the camera and something inside me stopped shaking. I walked back to the table, opened my laptop and sat down. Rachel tilted her head. What are you? I didn't answer. I pulled up a blank document and started typing a letter. Not to the police, not to a judge, but to someone who actually had power. Someone with reach, with platform. Someone who, once they saw what I had, couldn't unsee it. When I was done, I read it once, just once. Then I hit send. I sent it because that night I didn't cry. I drafted a letter and sent it to someone who had far more reach than a local cop. By the time the streetlights had faded into early gray, I was still awake. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator. My body hadn't asked for sleep. It had asked for truth, and I gave it that. Now I sat at the tiny kitchen counter, hunched over my laptop, the screen dimmed but alive. I sipped from a chipped mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. My hands didn't shake. Not from fear. Not anymore. I wasn't hiding anymore. The email was open, addressed to Elisa Carrington, a journalist I'd never spoken to, but had been watching for weeks. Her face had come on my screen one sleepless night, reporting on a woman who exposed her husband, a state senator, and survived not just the scandal, but the shame. Her story rewrote state law. That night, I had bookmarked Elisa's name. Now, I typed under it, "Dear Elisa, I don't know if you'll believe me, but I'm going to give you every reason to." I attached everything the copies of the money transfers Ethan made in my name, the audio files I'd recorded months ago, back when my instincts still whispered, "You're not safe." The photos I took, the first bruise, the receipts, the text threads with his threats hidden between casual lines. I included a full timeline. The police statement, my name. And then I wrote one last sentence and reread it twice before sending. If I disappear, this is my voice. Publish it anyway. I hit send. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair, staring out the small kitchen window. The sky was turning from steel to pale peach. Somewhere down the block, someone was dragging trash bins to the curb. Life outside hadn't changed, but something in me had. I hadn't cried last night, and I wasn't going to now. But my breath came deeper, slower. Like I had finally exhaled something I'd held for too long. I stood and walked to the restroom, turned on the light, and faced the mirror. The bruise under my left eye had started to yellow. It looked like old fruit. And for a moment I reached up and brushed it gently with my fingertip. "You're not my shame anymore," I whispered. It didn't sound powerful, but it sounded honest. My phone buzzed on the counter, an email notification. I rushed over and opened it. From Elisa Carrington. Subject, Restory submission. Body. "This will not be buried. Call you in an hour." That's when I let myself smile. Just a small one. I put the coffee down, rinsed my face in cold water, then returned to the laptop to wait. I didn't pace. I didn't second guess. Just sat there, heart steady. 40-5 minutes later, the Zoom link arrived. I clicked. Her face appeared sharp. Eyes, no makeup. She looked like she hadn't slept, but she also looked like someone who didn't waste time. "Luna," she said. "Thank you for trusting me." "I wasn't sure I should," I replied. "Honest." "Good. You shouldn't trust easy," she said. "But you trusted smart." She verified everything, every document, every timestamp, every voice file. She didn't rush me, didn't coddle me. She just listened and cross-checked. It felt less like being interviewed and more like passing. A relay baton to someone ready to sprint. But nothing prepared me for what she said next. "You're not the only one." I blinked. "What?" "There's another woman. Different state, same man, different name, but same pattern. I'll connect you to if you want." My stomach dropped. Ethan, he'd done this before. Another woman had once sat where I sat, told the same story to a wall of silence. And now we were both surfacing, gasping, maybe finally being heard. I nodded slowly. "Yes, please." We ended the call, and she promised to publish by Monday. I closed my laptop. My hand hovered for a second before letting the screen drop shut with a soft click. Just as I was about to stand, the burner phone I kept for emergencies buzzed beside me. Text lit up the screen from an unknown number. "You've made a mistake. Fix it or I will." I stared at the message, didn't move, didn't flinch. Then I said aloud to no one, "No, I just finally corrected one." What? I left the phone on the counter. Wasn't going to live in fear of it. Because for the first time in a very long time, my voice wasn't alone. And by Sunday, I wasn't hiding. I was preparing. And I wasn't the only one building a storm. By Sunday, I wasn't hiding. I was preparing. And I wasn't the only one building a storm. I zipped up my jacket against the late morning chill and walked through the side door of the old community center off Mason Street. It still smelled like chalk dust and burnt coffee from the AA meetings that used the space at peak night. I passed a wall lined with flyer self-defense workshops, grief circles, immigration support groups, and found the room Elisa had reserved for us. The folding chairs groaned as I sat down. Across the chipped laminate table, two women looked up, Dana and Alana, both older than me by a few years, both with faces that wore more than makeup. We greeted one another, not like survivors, but like strategists. That was Elisa's doing. Elisa had called us individually on Friday. She'd said, "You're not the only one. There's more, and it's time you met." Donna's voice broke the quiet first. "We're not here to swap war stories, right?" "No," I said. "We're here to change the pattern." She nodded. Her hands were firm on a thick folder, the corners worn. "Financial manipulation," she said simply. "He forged my signature, rerouted business accounts under his name, left me with the IRS breathing down my neck." Alana added, "He isolated me. No credit in my name. When I pressed charges, they said I didn't seem scared enough first time. Second time, the DA dropped it in the interest of preserving family stability." I leaned forward. "What we have now, it's not just stories, it's receipts." Alana slid over a thumb drive. Dana unfolded printouts and spreadsheets. I opened my laptop and pulled up the shared drive Elisa had set up secure, encrypted, and under a decoy name. We each uploaded our documentation bank. Statements, hospital records, texts, photos, police dismissals. Every time the system looked away, we saved the moment. That afternoon, we launched something small but solid, a private website. Just a single landing page with 3 names, 3 testimonies, and 1 statement. We are not asking for justice. We are showing you the proof you refuse to see. My final upload was an audio clipped-in's voice, low and mocking. "Even if you scream, no one's listening." I typed a caption beneath the audio file. We heard each other. That was it. No hashtags, no drama, just reality. Around 4 p.m., I drove back to my apartment. The wind had picked up a little, as if the air itself knew something was shifting. Stopped by the corner market, picked up some pasta and 2 frozen lemon bars. I'd never liked them much, but they were my mom's favorite. Maybe I just needed to remember someone used to care. Or maybe I was preparing for the kind of closure you don't find in courtrooms. Back home, I plugged in my phone and sat at the kitchen table. I pulled up the news site Elisa worked with. The draft headline sat in her final review folder. The hands behind the silence. 3 women, 1 man, and the system that let him roam. The words stared back at me like something sacred and dangerous all at once. I pressed a palm flat against the tabletop to ground myself. My other hand reached up, almost without thinking, to the fading bruise under my right eye. Still there, faint and yellowed now, but a memory all the same. I whispered, "You're not this shame anymore." Then I made the mistake of checking Instagram. Ethan had posted a photo from our wedding day. I was in lace, he was in navy. The caption read, "No one knew her like I did." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. He was baiting me, playing to his audience family, friends, former coworkers, church women who still thought he was charming. He wanted a reaction. Instead, I gave him silence, and something better. I pulled up my own photos, found the one I'd kept locked away in a cloud folder for years, a close-up shot of my hospital wristband, the date clearly visible. It was from the night I was admitted after a fall down the stairs, 1 year before our wedding. Ethan had driven me there himself and told the nurse I was clumsy. I posted the photo without a caption, just the truth. Plain, ugly, undeniable. And then I logged out. The wind rattled the window panes. Around 7:30, I made dinner, barely tasting a tan, stood by the counter, staring into the steam rising off the pot. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel angry either. What I felt was something steadier, something heavier, like the weight of finally standing up straight after years of hunching to survive before heading to bed. I walked through the apartment and double-checked the locks. I knew the article was scheduled to go live Monday morning. Knew we had less than 24 hours before. It wasn't just whispers between survivors. It would be public, and people would have to choose where they stood just before midnight. I lit a candle I hadn't touched since moving in. My therapist once told me that rituals matter when you're reclaiming space. So I sat quietly in the lounge, the candle flickering in the corner, and whispered not to God, but to myself, whatever comes, I'm ready. The article went live at 7:02 a.m. I didn't have to scroll far. Elisa's piece was pinned at the top of every news page. I opened. By 9 a.m., my phone buzzed with a call from Ethan's attorney. And by 9:15, another alert came through, this time from his firm. They weren't vague about it either. Termination review initiated. Confidentiality lifted. We'll be issuing a public statement within the hour. That sentence sat there on my screen as I stood barefoot in the kitchen. A lukewarm mug of tea untouched beside the sink. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was reacting. I was simply breathing. I didn't forward the email, didn't rush to post it online. I just exhaled. It's the quietest sound I'd made all morning, but it carried the most weight. I went about my day as normally as I could. I folded laundry, fed the cat, wiped the edge of the windowsill with my sleeve where dust had settled. Every now and then, I checked my phone, not obsessively, but enough to watch the digital current swell. The comments were flooding in beneath. The articles, some praising Elisa's reporting, some sharing their own truths, but it was the private messages that stopped me cold. One was from a name I didn't recognize, a woman named Camille. She wrote, "I read the article. I was one of his patients. Thank you for not staying quiet." I sat down at the table not because I felt weak, but because my knees trembled in a different way. Not fear, something more like release. By noon, another number appeared on my screen. A different law office. I hesitated but answered, M. Mercier. The voice on the line was calm, measured, a woman. "My name's Tehran Everett. I'm with the Fulton County DA's office. I wanted to let you know we're reopening your case." I didn't reply immediately. My mind blanked, like it didn't know how to compute that sentence. Tehran continued gently. "I'm sorry it took this long. There were procedural barriers. But now that certain pieces have surfaced publicly, the audio, those barriers no longer apply." I could have said 1,000 things. I could have asked why it had to take an article, a social storm, a wave of strangers. But I didn't. Instead, I just said, "Thank you for catching up." And she understood exactly what I meant. We scheduled a formal statement for Thursday. After I hung up, I found myself walking into the bedroom. The closet door stood slightly open. I pulled it wide and stepped inside like I had months ago, back when my only form of truth was a whisper between clothes racks and silence. I remembered it. Clearly, the phone clutched against my chest, my voice barely audible. "I'm recording." This just in case I'd said that day. That audio was now embedded at the end of Elisa's article. And now, according to Tehran, it was also logged into the official courthouse file. From my pocket, my phone buzzed again. I walked back to the kitchen and unlocked it, half expecting another message of support. But it wasn't that. It was Ethan. He had just uploaded a video. No edits, no background music, just his face. Messy hair, eyes red, voice shaking. "They're painting me like a monster," he said. "She's making it sound like I'm some kind of abuser. I loved her. I still do. But this ... this is cruel. She's not the woman you think she is. She's vengeful." I watched in silence, not because I was shocked, but because I could finally see through the performance. I used to mistake that voice, the fragility, the cracks, for regret. But now it just felt like someone desperately trying to pull a mask back on. Even after it had already hit the floor. Beneath his post, the comments were a mix at first, but then one took off. A woman replied, "She didn't break the silence. She survived it." That's louder. It was shared over 30,000 times before the hour was up. I closed the video and set my phone down again. It was only mid-afternoon when the next notification arrived, a legal one this time. Protective order expanded. Defendant is required to surrender all registered firearms by 10 p.m. tonight. I reread it once, then again slowly. The timestamp matched the motion. He'd been served. I leaned back in my chair, watching a thin beam of light stretch across the floor from the window. My tea was cold. My cat was curled up in the same patch of sun he always claimed. The first time since all of this began, the air around me felt still. I said it quietly, out loud. More to the walls than to anyone in particular. We're not done, but now we're not invisible either. There was no anger in my voice, just truth. And truth, when it finally has space to exist, doesn't need to scream. That night, I lit a candle not for grief, but for something I'd forgotten I deserved: peace. A week later, as the sun dropped, behind the city skyline, I stood outside the courthouse again. Same steps, same wide doors, but my knees didn't shake this time. In my hands, I held a sealed manila folder, the last of the paperwork. It wasn't heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. It might as well have been made of stone. My request to finalize the divorce, to let the protective order stand until the judge handed down a sentence. But that wasn't the reason I came tonight. I wasn't here to file papers. I was waiting. A breeze moved my coat as I watched cars ease past on the road. Evening traffic, horns low, radios, the occasional burst of laughter from a sidewalk cafe across the street. The courthouse loomed behind me, quiet now, its last clerk locking up the side entrance. Then headlights turned into the lot. The car rolled to a stop and Rachel stepped out first. She didn't wave. Just looked at me like I was already understood. Dana followed, coat sleeves pushed up, her expression calm but tired. Behind her, Alana. She carried nothing but a small candle in her hand. It was unlit. We didn't need words. We'd used so many already in months of late-night calls, hushed confessions, and courtroom benches. They stood beside me like pillars. I came here alone once, I murmured. I leave with sisters now. Rachel squeezed my arm. Dana gave a half smile. Alana simply nodded. The last of the sunlight kissed the horizon in orange and lavender. We stood there. 4 women facing a building that once echoed with silence. I turned, folders still in hand, and we walked in together. Inside, the corridor was dim. Fluorescent lights flickered above. The clerk at the front desk didn't even look up. I approached, handed over the envelope. He asked, "Final filing?" I nodded, yes. He stamped the form. No cameras, no crowd, no lawyers, no Ethan jest. The sound of paper sliding into a metal tray. Anything else? He asked. No, that's all. The walk back outside was quiet. When I pushed open the glass doors, the air felt fresher, cooler on my skin, sharper in my lungs. I stood there a moment longer, breathing. Across the street, a couple walked by, arm in arm, mid-conversation. A little boy chased a pigeon on the courthouse lawn. Life kept moving. Even when yours felt paused, it never really stopped. She reached into her coat and pulled out a thermos. Here, she said, offering it. Chamomile. I accepted, taking a sip, still warm, familiar. I remember the first time I called you, Alana said. You sounded small, not weak, just hidden. Yes. I replied. Hiding felt safer. There was a pause. Then Rachel added, but you still picked up the phone. That moment settled deep within me, because that was it, wasn't it? I didn't scream. I didn't break down in public. I didn't throw anything or fight him in front of witnesses. I just picked up the phone, whispered, documented, waited, and then moved. I blinked back and suddenly it was all there. The first bruise I covered with makeup. My mother's eyes, how they dropped to the floor instead of meeting mine. Ethan's voice after the first apology. You made me do that. the sound of a lock clicking and no one coming back. And finally, me, alone in the closet, one hand trembling, whispering into my phone. My name is Luna. I'm scared, but I'm done pretending I'm not. That clip made it into the article and the court file not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. I exhaled slowly and looked up at the courthouse windows. I imagined someone behind the glass reading my file now. Maybe a young lawyer, maybe a judge, maybe just another clerk. And maybe they'd pause not out of pity, but because they heard a woman who didn't yell, didn't perform, but survived. I turned to the others. I'll walk home. You sure? Rachel asked. I need the air. They didn't argue. They just hugged me one after the other. No fanfare, no final speech. As they pulled away, Alana pressed the unlit candle into my hand. For your window, she said, in case someone's still out there, waiting to believe it gets better. I walked the rest of the way with the candle tucked into my coat pocket. The streets glowed amber under street lamps. My steps felt lighter, not free, maybe, but no longer chained. When I reached my apartment, I unlocked the door, slipped off my shoes, and moved through the rooms without turning on every light like before. The place wasn't big, but it was mine, and it was quiet. It's not the kind of quiet that hides bruises, the kind that lets you exhale. I stood by the window, the same one. I'd stared out of the night he didn't come home and the nights I'd wished he wouldn't. I lit the candle. Its small flame flickered gently against the glass, casting just enough light to be noticed from the street. And then I whispered not to the room. Not to him, but maybe to someone like I once was. There are bruises no one sees. There are silences that cut deeper than fists. But there is also something else, the kind of healing that doesn't ask permission. I didn't move for a long while. I just stood watching the candle burn, and in its light I didn't see what I expected. Saw the truth I had waited so long to claim.